Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stew again. We're back looking at the U.S. high-speed rail corridors with the Northeast Corridor. The NEC is actually not on the list of Federal Railroad Administration high-speed rail corridors because it existed before the list. Just a smidge of history, even though I'm doing so at extreme peril and risking the wrath of rail fans everywhere. The current electrified 453-mile form of the Northeast Corridor main line from Washington, D.C. to Boston solidified in 2000 with the start of Acela Express service. This belies the system's much earlier origins. The line came together essentially in two halves with construction and consolidation into the early 20th century. One half being D.C. through Philadelphia and into New Jersey, the other being Boston to New York City. The two halves were joined with the construction of the North River tunnels, New York Penn Station, the Hellgate Bridge, and the line that weaves through Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx that is still part of the Northeast Corridor today. The lines were steadily electrified in the early 1900s, and by 1935 the section from D.C. to New Haven, Connecticut was converted. All of that came under the control of the Penn Central Transportation Company after further consolidation in the late 1960s as passenger rail in the U.S. was collapsing. That collapse led to the creation of Amtrak in 1971, and the timely consolidation led to most of the NEC track winding up in Amtrak's hands. When we talk about high-speed rail in the U.S. now, we generally lament how far we've fallen behind Europe or Asia. However, in the early 70s, Amtrak was running electrified revenue service at up to 120 miles per hour on the NEC, which was pretty competitive with other systems around the world. From there to now, the US high-speed rail industry has languished, while other world markets have steadily advanced. The NEC also languished until the 1990s when Congress passed an improvement plan that extended electrification to Boston. This slightly increased the standard and the technology, and that's basically where we are now in 2024. Trains that top out at 150 miles per hour and average about 75 miles per hour. Pretty lackluster compared to other countries where express passenger trains can average 150 miles per hour. So the question for this video is, what more can we do to improve performance on what is currently the country's only functional high-speed rail corridor? First, let's look at the region that surrounds the Northeast Corridor. That factors in hugely as to why the NEC is so important and why it's so difficult to improve for a reasonable cost. The NEC currently runs through Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. These states have a combined population of 48 million and a land area of 142,000 square miles. That is 85% as large as California with 20% more people. To drill down further, the metro areas of the Northeast Corridor total 43.7 million people. The metro's over 1 million population are New York City, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore, and Providence, Rhode Island. This mass of people lives inside a 21,000 square mile space. That is comparable to metropolitan Tokyo, which is the largest singular metro area on the planet. Currently, Acela Express service runs between Boston and Washington, D.C. with intermediate stops in Providence, Rhode Island, New Haven, Connecticut, Stamford, Connecticut, New York City, Newark, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Wilmington, Delaware, and Baltimore, Maryland. A trip between New York City and Boston takes about 3 hours 45 minutes. New York City to D.C. is just shy of 3 hours. This is an average of 62 and 78 miles per hour, respectively. Let's take a look at some ideas for improving those times from southwest to northeast. 11 miles out of Washington Union Station, there is an 18-mile section of track between the Seabrook and Baltimore Washington International stations. This currently has a speed limit of 125 miles per hour. In order to facilitate the 160 mile per hour top speed of coming Alstom Avelia Liberties, curve radii would need to be increased in this area. The stickiest part of this upgrade is needing to cross two swampy areas and cut through a hill inside the Pawtuxent Research Refuge. To stay sensitive to the situation, you'd need to cross the swamps by viaduct and then a 3,000-foot tunnel through a hill to maintain wildlife access. This would substantially improve migratory safety over the current route, which is on a berm and isn't even fenced. Other deficient curves in the area can be corrected with minimal impact to the surrounding community, although you'd likely need to move and rebuild the Odenton Mark Station 60 or 80 feet to the west. I have these changes and resulting speed increases cutting 5.5 minutes off current travel times for a cost of $900 million, including track and systems upgrades. Since we've mentioned costs, let me go over my estimation method. First, are we talking about new or existing right-of-way? What kind of structures are involved? Is it at-grade aerial trench or tunnel? How does the area complicate things? Is it urban, suburban, or rural? Lastly, an adjustment for variation in regional costs. Moving on to Baltimore, I came up with a scheme to reroute tracks via US 40 and the Franklin-Mulberry Expressway under Midtown, with a potential Union Station there for Amtrak, MARC, Baltimore Metro, and light rail links. This would save a couple of minutes by utilizing a 5-mile tunnel to cut 1.5 miles off the route currently under construction and keep speed at 110 miles per hour in the area for through trains. I estimate cost at $6 billion. The path does include an undesirable 2% grade out of the potential station site to the west, and a station would need to be about 70 feet below the surface. In addition, upgrades to the current route and Baltimore Penn Station total $6.5 billion, and this is duplicate work, so maybe something like this if you need to expand capacity through Baltimore at some point. What's your opinion on the best way to improve the intercity rail situation in Baltimore? Just northeast of Baltimore is a stretch along the coast where several high-speed bridge replacements are planned. With small adjustments to geometry, this could net 34 miles of mostly 150 to 160 mile per hour travel. Total cost on those new bridges is estimated at $4.7 billion. Those will support higher speed and add 2 tracks to their crossing, so there will be a throughput increase as well. If the proposed Gunpowder River Bridge can be nudged to the east, the curve proceeding northward could be adjusted from its current 125 mile per hour geometry to 160 miles per hour. In Aberdeen, the curve directly northeast of the station is limited to about 135 miles per hour. This can be adjusted to 150 miles per hour without having to destroy anything. However, the Aberdeen station would need to be moved 2 blocks southwest. Another one in the vicinity northeast of the Susquehanna River. Currently a mile radius on this one, which translates to about 125 miles per hour. This can be adjusted to 160 miles per hour plus. However, an adjacent curve, a tidal salt marsh, and Amtrak's Perryville maintenance base all need to be taken into consideration, driving up the cost. If track and system update costs are similar to work done in New Jersey, I have those at $1 billion for these 34 miles. Cost of the alignment adjustments I have at $650 million, including the new station in Aberdeen, giving a total of $6.3 billion, 3/4 of which is already covered. Trains are currently running through here at an average of 110 miles per hour. I have the improvements shaving off 6.5 minutes. That gives us a running total of 14 minutes saved and $8.5 billion extra spent. Now let's talk about a couple of ideas in the Wilmington, Delaware area. The first is a short bypass of the current Wilmington station. This would be utilized by express trains skipping a Wilmington stop. The idea is straightforward in existing rights-of-way. You're looking at 7.5 miles of track, mostly on viaduct, to facilitate 60 feet of navigational clearance on the Christina River and connections to the NEC main line on either end. This would be able to cruise through the area at 125 miles per hour, avoiding 2 slower speed curves and a pinch point in the main line that is currently only double-tracked. Also important would be an additional track for 7 miles west of there to retain 4 tracks total. I have all of that costing about $2 billion and saving 6 minutes over a stop in Wilmington. Running total 20 minutes saved and $10.5 billion spent, or roughly $500 million a minute. That's it for the geometry changes on the current main line between New York City and Washington, D.C. There are just too many structural issues with the Philadelphia, Newark, and New York City areas to fix geometry for a reasonable cost. That brings us down to a 2-hour 34-minute trip. That's an average of 87 miles per hour, including stops. I do have an idea for improving this further with a bypass of Trenton, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and Wilmington. Let's take a closer look at that. Separating from the NEC main line 5 miles west of Wilmington, the line would need to rise up on viaduct to cross an estuary, the Christina River, and the intersection of 3 freeways. Crossing into the Interstate 295 right-of-way would require the destruction of 15 homes. Then it's down we go on a 1.5% grade and under the Delaware River in a 4-mile tunnel. Emerging on the New Jersey side and immediately onto viaduct to cross a creek and then into the New Jersey Turnpike right-of-way. Our means of conveyance here is 45 miles of New Jersey Turnpike. This would require the cooperation of the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. There is plenty of available right-of-way with their property extending 100 feet on either side of existing lanes through the area in question. This is a fast route able to support 200-mile-per-hour travel in the current geometry, with a couple of exceptions that can be corrected with available adjacent land. I like a station near Haddonfield, New Jersey, next to the Patco Woodcrest station. This would provide access to Camden and Philadelphia in 15 to 25 minutes on a transfer, as well as access to Atlantic City in about an hour. There are additional station sites available for regional and local transit as well, which would vastly improve direct intercity transit access between southwestern New Jersey and the I-95 corridor. In Mansfield, New Jersey, I have the proposed route transitioning from the New Jersey Turnpike to Interstate 295. Interstate 295 possesses an adequate median the entire way between the New Jersey Turnpike and the NEC main line, and the route is 110 mph capable unaltered. You have a potential station site in South Trenton at a struggling strip mall with overbuilt parking, which could be connected to Trenton's light rail. And finally, hooking back into the NEC main line 5 miles northeast of downtown Trenton. This route would cut 30 minutes off travel between the Trenton and Wilmington areas, 24 minutes if you're counting the aforementioned Wilmington Bypass. Including planned improvements north of Trenton, that would produce an express time between New York City and DC of 2 hours flat, at an average speed of 114 miles per hour including stops. This is comparable to many high-speed rail lines around the world and is an hour faster than flying, all things considered. I have this 70-mile option at $18.6 billion, mostly due to regional adjustments in New Jersey. That brings the total DC to New York City cost at roughly $30 billion beyond what is already planned. I looked at various ideas for bypassing New York City, but one does not simply bypass New York City. The best I came up with was a route through the Bronx with a potential station near Fordham Plaza via a 7 to 9 mile tunnel under the Hudson River and the city. It would be faster but very expensive, and you'd bypass Manhattan, which is the most important destination on the line. I'm not saying it's impossible. What do you think about a Manhattan bypass? Leave a comment. I don't have a solution for Southwest Connecticut, and I don't think anyone does that is worth the time or money. Currently, the rotting 100-plus-year-old area rail bridges are in the process of being replaced, and electrical systems are being upgraded. When done in 10 or 15 years, this work is expected to decrease travel times over the abysmal state of repair in the present. There are further ideas for improving travel times between New York City and Boston. Let's look at a few. Looking at NEC Future Second Spine alternatives, the big idea seems to be routing through Hartford, Connecticut. We're presented with three options. Number one, New Haven to Hartford along the existing Hartford line that Connecticut just got funds to finish double tracking. Number two appears to be a combination of existing rail Interstate 684 and Interstate 84 heading through White Plains, New York and Danbury, Connecticut. Number three, east through Long Island, north under Long Island Sound in a long undersea tunnel, emerging west of New Haven to rejoin the NEC main line. From Hartford, a direct line to Providence, Rhode Island through the University of Connecticut is present. In my opinion, this is nothing more than a line connecting three dots. The more viable option appears to be northeast along Interstate 84 to Worcester, Massachusetts, and then east to Boston along Interstate 90. We'll start with the New York City to Hartford alternatives. Existing NEC main line to New Haven, Connecticut, then to Hartford. There is room in and adjacent to the right-of-way for 4 tracks along half the length and 3 tracks for all but a few miles. These would be necessary to support local commuter rail as well as NEC regional and Acela services. This would start 2 miles north of New Haven Union Station where the current NEC main line heads east and end at Hartford Union. I'm counting 18 at-grade crossings. The route is already about half-grade separated. I have this as a surprisingly speedy and cheap option, averaging 113 miles per hour on an 18-minute express for $3 billion to add a third track and electrify. The second option from New York City to Hartford through the Bronx, White Plains, New York, and Danbury, Connecticut. MTA Metro North's Harlem line is a good conduit out of the city to the north. The shortest distance between it and the NEC would be a mile-long tunnel linking New York Penn Station and Grand Central. Yes, the route has plenty of challenges, but let's roll with it to the end. The Harlem line either has 4 tracks or room for 4 all the way out of the city, and it's pretty straight. It's third rail out to White Plains, so you either need to add catenary or use dual-mode trains. Speed is limited to 90 miles per hour by geometry anyway. The options look pretty good all the way up to Croton Falls, about 50 miles from Penn Station. There we jump into the Interstate 684 right-of-way for 5 miles and then transition to Interstate 84. Both have plenty of room. Interstate 84 isn't particularly fast, but facilitates some nice regional stops like Danbury and Waterbury in Connecticut. Near downtown Hartford, the route would transition to the Hartford line and into Hartford Union Station. I have this route at 5 miles longer than the NEC main line plus Hartford line combined. It's rather slow. I have it averaging 86 miles per hour in motion. However, the NEC main line to New Haven is so bad that this would be 10 minutes faster to Hartford than Acela is now to New Haven. I have the cost of this 118-mile option at $18.4 billion. A fair amount of that is assuming a mile of tunnel in Manhattan will be inordinately expensive. And now, the ultimate option through Long Island and under Long Island Sound to New Haven. This would utilize MTA Long Island Railroad right-of-way starting at Sunnyside Yards in Queens where the NEC and MTA LIRR main lines diverge. The route is 4 tracks plus in this area, but it's third rail. A little bit different situation than the Harlem line, but still with the complication of sharing an already very busy route. This would intercept Jamaica Station in Queens, which is the 3rd busiest train station in the United States, only a little behind Grand Central. Obviously, you'd want your intercity train stopping there. East of Jamaica Station, the right-of-way is straight for 16 miles, so you want catenary to get full speed here. The right-of-way continues with 4 tracks, another 6 miles until there is a line divergence at Floral Park, and our desired path consolidates to 3 tracks. Adding a 4th shouldn't be an issue. Diverging again 10 miles further east at Hicksville and condensing again to 2 tracks. The right-of-way looks like it can handle 4 tracks here as well. another 10 miles east and down to one track around Huntington Station. This condition continues another 20 miles out to the Port Jefferson area near the northern Long Island coast. The right-of-way is fine for 2 additional tracks nearly the whole way without issue. Maintaining speed would require a couple of inland tunnels. There's a north-south power transmission corridor near the end of the line, which looks like the only viable means of creating a portal to a large undersea tunnel system. I have the tunnel between Long Island and Connecticut at 19.5 miles, 16 of that underwater. I have this hooking back up with the NEC main line just west of Milford, Connecticut. Based on similar tunnels like the Channel Tunnel or the Seikan Tunnel in Japan, it's reasonable to assume cost on that would be around $1 billion per mile. Overall, I have this route at 10 miles longer than the current NEC main line between New York Penn and New Haven Union. Assuming all the dominoes fall into place, you're looking at an average of 117 miles per hour on the new portion at a cost of $33.8 billion. That's less than I thought it would be. On this new Long Island high-speed railroad, I have a New York City to New Haven Express with a stop at Jamaica taking 50 minutes, which would be half the current time. We've described the hypothetical upgrades to Hartford. Now let's look at getting from Hartford to Boston via Worcester, Massachusetts. From Hartford Union, we'll follow existing rail over the Connecticut River and hook up with Interstate 84 5 miles east of that. This corridor has lots of room all the way to the junction with Interstate 90 just north of the border with Massachusetts. This part is also a lot straighter than the portion in western Connecticut. Connecticut is pretty hilly. As a result, I have a few short tunnels to drive through those hills when warranted. The transition from Interstate 84 to Interstate 90 is easy with a high-speed flyover. 10 miles east of that, you'd want to move north into the CSX right-of-way just south of Worcester. Plenty of room and no issues until reaching Worcester proper, then things get complicated. It is possible to add a track to what CSX has going on, but it looks expensive, and of course CSX will need to agree to it. The situation is complex at the Worcester station, with a CSX yard thrown in to boot. However, west of there, the line is owned by Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority, which in theory makes things easier. The route east of Worcester is double-tracked. There is room for a third track the whole way and a fourth for half the distance back to Interstate 90 where it meets Interstate 495. The Worcester detour from I-90 will be slow, but it's a metro of over 800,000 and there aren't any satisfying station sites along the freeway anyway. East of Interstate 495, Interstate 90 has room for rail until reaching Interstate 95. At that point, you'd want to transition back to the MBTA right away. You're looking at sharing this double-tracked line with MBTA, nice website by the way, and Amtrak, so there will likely be traffic issues. On the bright side, the geometry is going to keep speed below 75 miles per hour anyway. This continues for 11 miles until reaching Boston South Station. It looks possible to engineer a third track for about half the final 11 miles to alleviate traffic and facilitate speed. I have all that at a 105 mile per hour average and 1 hour flat between Hartford and Boston with a stop in Worcester. I have the cost for these 104 miles at $13.6 billion. I had an idea for an alternate route along Interstate 395 from Old Saybrook to Boston, but the Hartford options compare so favorably it doesn't warrant more than a mention. Let's combine some of these segments and see what we get. Grand Central detour to Hartford plus Hartford to Boston. That's about 6 miles shorter than current at 222 miles. I have an Acela 2 on this route between New York Penn and Boston taking 2 hours 40 minutes. With stops at Grand Central, White Plains, Hartford, and Worcester. That sound you hear is all the people weeping that currently take 4 hours to make this trip with none of those stops available. I have costs for that at $32 billion in 2028 dollars. What about the slightly wacky Voyage Under the Sea through Long Island? Combining the sections discussed at 225 miles, also slightly shorter than the existing NEC mainline, this one is quite a bit faster at 2 hours 10 minutes. That's a 104 mile per hour average between Manhattan and Boston, including stops. Also expensive though at $50 billion. That route would include stops at Jamaica Station in Queens, New Haven, Hartford, and Worcester. One more option, probably the most realistic of the bunch, from the NEC mainline in New Haven, Connecticut, north to Hartford, then along Interstate 84 to Worcester and Interstate 90 to Boston. 13 miles shorter than present, Acela takes an hour and 35 minutes from New York City to New Haven. Add 20 minutes for Hartford and an hour from there to Boston for 2 hours 55 minutes, cutting 50 minutes off the current time. Stops between New York City and Boston would be at Stamford, New Haven, Hartford, and Worcester. I estimate cost at $16.6 billion, which isn't bad for 138 miles of track in this part of the country. The NEC Connect 2035 plan estimates that ongoing improvements between New York City and New Haven could cut 25 minutes off a trip, which would bring the Hartford-Worcester option down to a respectable 2 hours 30 minutes. That's 86 miles per hour on average and about even on time with flying, all things considered. This range of options could cut a Washington, D.C. to Boston trip from 6 hours 40 minutes to between 4 hours 10 minutes and 5 hours at a cost between $27 and $86 billion beyond what is already planned. What do you think the best choices are for each half? What are some ideas I may have missed? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like. Still more Federal Railroad Administration high-speed rail corridor videos to come. The Northern New England corridor is next. More city pair videos in the pipeline. Also keep an eye out for full-length videos visualizing routes with Unreal Engine 5 like you saw many times in this video. And of course look for another Stew's News on the last Friday of the month. But that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you on that big beautiful freeway.